Luke Halden started his morning the same way he always did, with the quiet sound of wind pushing against the old ranch windows and the soft noise of his boots hitting the wooden floor. The storm from the night before had shaken his ranch more than he expected. A few fences had already fallen earlier in the season, so he knew he had to check the south ridge before anything else. He saddled up his horse, Copper, and rode out before the sun had fully climbed over the hills. The land looked different after a storm. The dirt smelled rich, the grass bent low, and the sky seemed washed clean. Luke rode slowly, his eyes scanning the distance. He didn't expect trouble, but ranch life had taught him that trouble didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waited quietly until someone found it. He reached the first fence line and saw fresh mud tracks leading away from the road. They didn't belong to any of his cattle. He leaned down, slid his glove across the prints, and recognized the clear mark of a horse's hoof, deep and uneven like the animal had slipped or been pushed hard. He frowned. It wasn't common for riders to be out this way, especially after a storm that had left the ground slick and unpredictable. He followed the tracks. As Copper climbed the ridge, Luke spotted something unusual, a saddlebag lying on the ground, soaked and half covered in mud. He picked it up and brushed off the dirt. It was heavy and looked like the kind used by rodeo riders, tough and decorated with leather stitching. He knew very few rodeo folk who passed through these parts, but he had heard stories of a tall cowgirl who traveled alone. Many people spoke of her size with surprise, some with admiration. Luke had never met her, but the bag made him wonder if she was somewhere close. He didn't have to wonder long. At the top of the ridge, he found her. A tall woman sat on the ground beside a fallen horse, breathing hard and holding her ankle with both hands. Her hat had slipped off, her braid was loose, and her clothes were soaked with dirt and rainwater. Even from a distance, Luke could see she was not in good condition. She looked strong, built from years of hard ranch work, but pain had drained the color from her face. Her horse was alive but exhausted, lying on its side and trembling. Luke slowed his horse, trying not to startle her. But the moment she saw him, her eyes widened with a strange mix of relief and fear. She tried to stand but fell back, gripping her ankle tighter. He jumped off Copper and hurried over. "Hey, don't move! You're hurt!" Her voice came out strained, nearly breaking. "Please, just make it fast." The words hit him sharply. For a few moments, Luke didn't understand what she meant. Make what fast? Was she in danger? Was she asking him to do something he didn't fully understand? He froze, unsure of how to react. He had seen many people in pain before, but never someone saying something like that. Her voice carried desperation, not anger. Her breathing was uneven, and she looked ready to faint. But as he saw the deep swelling around her ankle and the way her hands shook, the meaning became painfully clear. She needed help immediately. Whatever she was going through, she didn't want to struggle or cause trouble. She just wanted relief. Luke kneeled beside her. "I'm here to help. I'm not going to leave you like this." She looked at him, her eyes slightly unfocused. She tried to speak again, but the pain was too strong. Luke didn't waste another second. He gently checked her ankle, careful not to cause more pain. She winced but didn't pull away. "It's twisted bad," he said softly. "Maybe more." She closed her eyes, her jaw clenched as she tried to stay calm. "I tried to walk. My horse slipped on the ridge. I was thrown. I couldn't get up again." Luke nodded. Even from a distance, he had seen how muddy the slope was. Any horse could have lost footing there. He placed her saddlebag beside her and stood up, looking at the distance back to his ranch. It wasn't far, but carrying a person across rough land was not easy. Still, he knew he had no other choice. "I'm going to lift you onto my horse," he said. "We'll get you somewhere safe." She opened her eyes again, confused. "I'm heavy. I don't want to make it harder for you." Luke almost smiled, but he stopped himself, not wanting her to think he was teasing. "I think I'll manage. Copper is strong, and so am I." Before she could argue again, he slid his arms under her shoulders and knees. She tensed, not used to being helped, but she didn't fight him. When he lifted her, she gasped in pain and gripped his shirt, trying not to cry out. Luke moved carefully, steadying her as he brought her to Copper. The horse stood still, as if understanding the seriousness of the moment. Luke settled her on the saddle, making sure her injured ankle didn't hit anything. She leaned forward slightly, breathing heavily. "You're safe," Luke said quietly. "I'm taking you to my ranch house. It's only 15 minutes from here." She nodded weakly. "Thank you. I didn't know if anyone would come this way." "I check this ridge after every storm," he answered, climbing up behind her so he could support her. "You're lucky I started early." The ride back was slow. Luke held her steady, one arm around her back, the other guiding Copper. She stayed quiet, but he could feel the tension in her body every time Copper stepped over uneven ground. He talked to her softly, just enough to keep her awake. "What's your name?" he asked eventually. "Mara," she whispered. "Mara Lee." The name clicked. She was the rodeo cowgirl others had talked about. Tall, powerful, always traveling alone because she didn't want to depend on anyone. The kind of person who hid pain instead of showing it. Luke felt a strange respect forming in his chest. When they finally reached the ranch house, he lifted her down carefully and helped her onto the long wooden porch bench. She gripped the edge of the bench tightly as he went inside to grab a first aid kit, clean cloth, and bandages. He washed her ankle gently with warm water. The swelling was bad, and she sucked in sharp breaths with each touch, but she didn't complain. Her strength impressed him. Many people would have cried or yelled by now, but she faced it with quiet toughness. "You're doing great," Luke said gently. "But this looks worse than a basic twist. You might need a doctor." "No." Her voice was immediate, too immediate. She shook her head, her braid swinging over her shoulder. "I can't go to a doctor, not now." Luke lifted his eyebrows. "Why not?" "If it's fractured, it can't go on record," she interrupted. "I have a rodeo season ahead. If they see I got hurt before it even started, I'll be forced to sit out. I can't lose this chance." Luke looked at her more carefully then. Her face, though tired and pale from the fall, still held determination. It was clear she wasn't just saying this out of fear. She had worked her whole life to reach where she was. She didn't want anything to take that away, but her injury was serious. Luke could see it in the swelling, the purple rising under her skin. "You shouldn't put pressure on that foot for a while," he said. "Even if you don't go to a doctor, you need care." "I know," she whispered. "I just didn't want to be out here alone. When I saw you, I thought maybe I finally got lucky." Luke paused. The earlier words she had said, "Please, just make it fast," echoed in his mind with a new understanding. She had been scared, not of him or the storm, but of being helpless. She hated the idea of someone seeing her in a weak moment. The sky darkened suddenly as storm clouds returned. Rain started falling in light drops, tapping on the porch roof. Mara looked toward the road, knowing she couldn't ride home now even if she tried. "You can stay here until the weather clears," Luke said. "I have a spare room." She hesitated. Accepting help was not something she was used to, but she also knew she had no other choice. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice soft and honest. Luke nodded. He brought her a blanket, some warm tea, and stayed nearby in case she needed anything. The storm grew stronger outside, wind shaking the windows. Mara watched the rain, then looked at Luke with tired but grateful eyes. She didn't say anything else, and she didn't need to. Luke already understood the truth. Their paths had crossed for a reason neither of them expected. The storm grew heavier through the evening, the kind of steady rain that made the land smell fresh but kept people inside. Luke placed a soft pillow under Mara's injured ankle and made sure it was slightly raised. She watched him with a quiet mix of gratitude and discomfort, still not used to someone caring so attentively for her. "Does it hurt less like this?" he asked. "It's better," she replied, though the strain in her voice told him she was being brave more than honest. He brought her a warm bowl of stew he had made earlier that morning. She hesitated before taking it. Like she didn't want to trouble him any further, but eventually she accepted it with both hands. She ate slowly, taking small bites, the tiredness still heavy on her face. "You didn't have to cook for me," she said softly. "I didn't cook it for you," Luke answered, leaning against the kitchen doorway. "But I'm glad I had something ready." That brought the first small smile to her face all day. She looked around the ranch house, noticing the simple but warm atmosphere. Wooden shelves filled with old books and framed photos, a sturdy fireplace, and a big window overlooking the pasture. It felt lived in, steady, and peaceful, very different from the fast-moving rodeo lifestyle she was used to. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yeah," Luke replied. "Been that way a long time." Mara nodded as if she understood that kind of loneliness. People often assumed she had plenty of company because she worked in crowded events and rodeo circuits. But the truth was different. Traveling constantly left little time to form real connections, and she had learned to keep her feelings guarded. She set the empty bowl aside. "Your place feels calm," she said. "Calmer than anything I've been around in months." Luke didn't respond right away. He wasn't the type to speak just to fill silence. Instead, he checked her ankle again, gently pressing around the swollen area. She winced, gripping the edge of the couch. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I just wanted to see if the swelling has spread." "It's okay," she whispered. "I've had worse." Luke looked at her, knowing she was telling the truth. He had heard stories from ranchers who met her at rodeos. She had a reputation for being tough, not just physically, but mentally. She kept going even when anyone else would have stopped. But now, sitting injured on his couch, she looked like someone carrying more weight than she liked to admit. He carefully wrapped her ankle again and placed a warm cloth around it. When she leaned back, exhausted, he finally asked, "How long have you been riding alone?" "A few years," she answered. "Ever since my family ranch started falling apart. I had to earn money somehow, and rodeo was the fastest way. I'm tall and strong. People noticed me. I got a few small wins, enough to keep moving." "What about your family?" Luke asked gently. She hesitated before replying. "My mom's gone. My dad, he tried, but he couldn't keep the ranch running. I left because I didn't want to be another mouth he felt responsible for. I wanted to help, but I could only help from far away." Luke's eyes softened. He didn't say, "I'm sorry," because he sensed she didn't want pity. Instead, he said, "You did what you thought was right." Mara nodded, though the sadness behind her eyes didn't fade. She shifted slightly but winced at the pain in her ankle. "You need rest," Luke said. "You can stay here until the storm ends, maybe longer if your ankle needs more time." "But what about your work?" she asked. "I don't want to slow you down." "You're not," he said simply. "There's always work on a ranch. I'll manage." The storm roared louder outside, rain hitting the roof in firm sheets. Mara watched the window for a while, her eyes drifting between the falling rain and Luke's steady movements. It surprised her how calm she felt. Normally, being stuck somewhere during an injury would make her anxious, but something about Luke's quiet nature made her feel safe. When the night deepened, Luke showed her the spare room. The bed was simple but clean, with a warm quilt folded neatly on top. She felt awkward letting him help her walk to the door. but she couldn't put weight on her foot without sharp pain shooting through her leg. "Let me know if you need anything," Luke said. "I'll be in the next room." She nodded, holding on to the doorframe. "Thank you, Luke." He gave a small nod and stepped back. After she closed the door, he paused for a moment, wondering why her simple thank you had felt so sincere. Then he returned to the living room, sitting down near the window to listen to the rain. Mara lay in the bed, staring up at the ceiling. She could hear the storm outside, but the ranch house made it sound distant, almost like a lullaby. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she didn't have to pretend to be strong every second. She had gotten used to hiding pain and pushing herself harder than she should, but with Luke, she didn't feel judged. Still, she also felt uneasy. Accepting help had never been easy for her. Her thoughts wandered back to the moment on the ridge. When she said those panicked words, "Please, just make it fast," she hadn't meant anything dramatic. She had simply been scared she would be stuck there for hours or pass out in the mud alone. She didn't want her size, strength, or stubbornness to become a burden to someone else. But Luke hadn't treated her like a burden. He had reacted with calm, even when her words confused him. That stayed with her. She sighed and closed her eyes, letting exhaustion take over. In the early morning, Luke checked on her. He knocked softly on the door, and when she didn't respond, he entered quietly. She was still asleep, her posture tense even in rest. Her ankle was slightly more swollen than before. He didn't want to wake her, so he stepped out quietly and started his morning chores, feeding the animals, checking the horses, and clearing broken branches near the pasture. As he worked, his thoughts circled back to Mara more than once. It wasn't like him to think so much about a stranger, but her strength and vulnerability had left an impression. By the time Mara woke up, sunlight was pouring through the window. She sat up slowly, wincing as her ankle reminded her of its condition. When she tried to stand, the pain nearly made her fall, and she had to grab the bedpost. Luke heard the sound and rushed to the room. "You all right?" She looked embarrassed. "Yeah, I just forgot that I'm out of commission." He stepped closer, offering his arm. "Don't try to walk yet." She sighed and allowed him to help her back to the living room. Once she sat down on the couch, she rubbed her forehead. "I hate feeling useless." "You're not useless," Luke said calmly. "You're injured. That's different." Mara looked at him, surprised by the firm gentleness of his tone. She didn't argue back this time. Luke made her breakfast, eggs, toast, and tea. She ate while watching him move around the kitchen with natural ease. It struck her that he wasn't nervous, wasn't acting like she was an inconvenience, and wasn't trying to impress her. He was simply being himself. After breakfast, she asked, "Can I help with anything? I can at least do something with my hands." Luke shook his head. "You need to rest. Your ankle won't heal if you push it." "I don't like sitting around while someone else works." "I know," he said, meeting her eyes, "but sometimes resting is the hardest work." That made her laugh softly. "You sound like my old rodeo coach." Luke lifted an eyebrow. "Was he wise?" "No," she said with a smirk. "He just liked saying things that sounded wise." Luke chuckled, a quiet, warm sound that filled the room gently. Mara felt something shift in the air, something subtle but comforting. She hadn't laughed like that in a long time. As the day passed, the storm cleared, but the roads remained muddy. Luke spent hours outside repairing fences, and Mara watched through the window, feeling both grateful and guilty. She wanted to help, but all she could do was keep her foot elevated. When Luke returned inside, covered in mud and tired, Mara said, "I wish I could do something useful." "You can," he replied. "You can let yourself heal." She shook her head. "That's not easy for me." "I figured," Luke said with a nod. But maybe it's time you stop carrying everything alone." Mara didn't answer. His words hit deeper than she expected. By evening, the air outside was calm again. Luke brought her another warm cloth for her ankle, and she watched him as he gently wrapped the bandage. His hands were steady, his voice quiet, and his presence grounding. "You're good at this," she said. "Ranch life teaches you plenty," he replied. "Especially how to take care of things that can't speak for themselves." She looked up at him with soft eyes. "I'm not a horse, you know." "I know," Luke said with a small smile. "But pain is pain, and no one should face it alone." The simple truth in his words made her chest tighten. She had spent years proving she didn't need anyone. But now, sitting in this quiet ranch house, being cared for without judgment, she realized how lonely she had been. As night settled in again, she leaned back slowly, her ankle elevated, her body finally relaxing. Luke sat across from her, reading a worn-out book, glancing up every now and then to check on her. For the first time in a long time, Mara felt like she didn't have to fight everything on her own. And she didn't know it yet. But Luke's quiet decision to help her through this injury would soon lead to a moment neither of them saw coming. A moment that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning arrived with a pale gold sky stretching across the Wyoming hills, and the air felt clean after 2 days of strong rain. The ranch house was quiet, except for the soft clatter of dishes as Luke prepared breakfast. Mara woke slowly, blinking at the sunlight streaming through the spare room window. Her ankle throbbed before she even tried to move it, reminding her instantly of her injury. She sighed and sat up, brushing her hair back into a loose braid. Luke appeared at the door, carrying a tray with warm food. "Morning," he said gently. "You're awake just in time." "You didn't have to bring it all the way here," she said, though she took the tray with a grateful look. "I know," Luke replied, "but you shouldn't walk yet." She wanted to protest, but the sharp pain in her ankle convinced her to stay quiet. She ate slowly while he sat in a chair near her bed, making notes on a small notepad he always kept in his pocket. "What are you writing?" she asked. "Just keeping track of repairs I need to finish before winter sets in," he answered. "Storms always damage something." Mara nodded, noticing how organized he was in small but steady ways. It reminded her of how different their lives were. She lived fast, moving from town to town, grabbing opportunities where she could. Luke lived slow, steady, grounded. Yet somehow their paths had crossed at the exact time she needed help the most. When she finished eating, Luke helped her move to the living room so she could sit comfortably on the couch. She hated needing help, but he made the process feel easy and natural, not awkward, not embarrassing. As she settled down, Luke checked her ankle again. The swelling had spread and the bruising was darker than before. Mara watched his face carefully. He had a calm expression, but his eyes tightened with concern. "It's worse, isn't it?" she asked quietly. "It needs more care," he admitted. "A lot more." She leaned back, frustration filling her chest. "I hate this. I hate sitting around. I hate that you have to waste your time looking after me." "It's not a waste," he said simply. "And you're not a problem." Her face softened for a moment, but she quickly looked away. She wasn't used to such steady kindness. Luke placed fresh bandages on her ankle and then stood. "I'll be outside checking the roof and fences. If you need anything, just call." "Luke," she said, stopping him at the door. "Thank you. Really." He nodded once and left. Outside, the sun warmed the muddy ground as he worked, repairing broken boards and clearing fallen branches. Mara watched from the window again, feeling a strange mix of peace and guilt. She wanted to help, wanted to be useful, wanted to stand beside him rather than sit helplessly indoors. But every movement of her foot sent pain shooting up her leg, a strong reminder that her body needed rest even if her mind didn't. Hours passed, and Luke came in for water. Mara was sitting quietly, staring at the floor. He noticed right away something was bothering her. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated, then sighed. "I feel trapped. I feel like I'm getting in your way. You have so much work to do, and I'm just sitting here." Luke walked over and sat across from her. "Mara, listen to me. You're injured. Injuries need time. That isn't your fault." "I know," she whispered, "but I don't want anyone thinking I can't handle myself." Luke paused, choosing his words carefully. "Being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone." She looked at him, surprised by the quiet truth in his voice. He stood again and brought her some warm tea before returning outside. Mara sipped it slowly, thinking about his words. She had spent years proving to everyone, even to herself, that she didn't need help. But Luke didn't treat her like she was weak or incapable. He simply treated her like she mattered. Later in the afternoon, she tried to stand up again to stretch her legs, even though she knew she shouldn't. The moment she put weight on her injured foot, a sharp bolt of pain forced her back onto the couch. She clenched her jaw, gripping the cushion. Luke rushed inside instantly. "What happened?" "I just tried to stand," she muttered, embarrassed. He crouched next to her, worry clear on his face. "You could have fallen. Mara, you have to let it heal." "I can't just sit forever," she snapped, more out of frustration at herself than at him. "I'm not asking you to sit forever," he said, "just long enough so you don't make it worse." She looked away, breathing hard. The pain was strong enough to make her eyes sting, though she refused to let tears show. Luke gently placed a hand near her ankle, not touching the swollen area, just close enough to steady her. "Let me carry you to the porch. Fresh air might help." She wanted to argue, but she gave up. "Fine." He lifted her carefully, and although she kept stiff at first, she eventually relaxed against him. On the porch, he set her down on a cushioned bench. The breeze was cool and soft, brushing against her face. She inhaled deeply, the fresh air clearing her thoughts a little. For a while, they sat without talking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural. The birds chirped, the cattle grazed in the distance, and the sound of wind made everything feel grounded. "Luke," she said eventually, her voice softer, "why did you do all this for me?" He looked at her, puzzled. "Because you needed help. But you don't even know me." Luke thought for a moment before answering. "I don't need to know someone to help them. You were hurt." "That's reason enough." Mara stared at him, trying to understand a kind of kindness she wasn't used to. People in rodeo circuits were often friendly, but everything there moved fast. Alliances came and went, trust was thin, and everyone focused on winning. Luke was different. He helped without expecting anything. She looked down at her hands. "I'm not very good at relying on others." Luke smiled faintly. "I noticed." Her cheeks warmed slightly. "Is it that obvious?" "A little," he admitted. "But it's all right. You're learning." She let out a slow breath. "I guess I am." As evening approached, the weather shifted again. Luke noticed dark clouds building in the west. "Another storm is coming," he said. "I'll check the barn quickly before it gets bad." Mara watched him hurry outside. Minutes later, the wind picked up and rain began to fall. She tried to stay calm, but when thunder rolled across the sky, a memory flashed in her mind. The fall on the ridge, the pain, the fear of being alone. "Luke!" she called out loudly. He appeared at the door, dripping from the sudden rain. "I'm here!" She swallowed, embarrassed by her own reaction. I didn't want you left out there if the storm gets worse." "I won't," he assured her. "I'm done for the evening." The thunder rumbled again and she shivered. Luke noticed and closed the door, shutting out the cold wind. He brought her a soft blanket and a mug of warm cocoa. She took it with both hands. "I haven't had cocoa in years." "Well," Luke said, sitting across from her, It's good for storms." The rain beat harder against the windows, but somehow she didn't feel afraid anymore. She felt safe here, in this quiet ranch house, with a man who didn't treat her like she was a burden. After a few minutes, Luke checked her ankle again, and that's when he froze. The swelling was too severe now. Her foot had grown stiff, and the discoloration was spreading faster than yesterday. It wasn't normal. It wasn't safe. "Mara," he said quietly, trying to keep his voice calm, "you need medical help. This isn't something that will heal on its own." Her eyes widened in panic. "No, Luke, I can't go to a clinic. They'll report the injury. The rodeo season—" "Mara, listen," he said firmly. "I understand your dreams matter. But if your ankle is fractured, pushing it could end your entire career, not just this season." She clenched her jaw, breathing hard. "I can't lose this chance." "You'll lose everything if you don't treat it," Luke said. He wasn't angry, but his voice carried urgency. "Your health comes first." She looked overwhelmed, torn between fear and stubborn determination. Then lightning flashed brightly outside, followed by a powerful crash of thunder. The house shook slightly. Luke made his decision. Without another word, he stood up, walked to her side, and said firmly, "I'm taking you to the clinic." Mara shook her head. "No, Luke, you can't. Please." But he wasn't listening to refusal anymore. He lifted her gently into his arms as she grabbed his shirt in shock. She didn't fight, but her voice trembled. "You're risking the roads," she whispered. "The mud. Your truck could slip." "I don't care," he said calmly. "You're more important." Her eyes widened at those simple words. He carried her through the rain to his truck, shielding her from the wind. Placing her carefully in the passenger seat, he buckled her in before closing the door. As he walked around to the driver's side, Mara stared at him through the window. This quiet man who was putting her safety above everything, even above her own fears. And in that moment, she realized something. Luke wasn't doing the easy thing. He was doing the right thing, even when she couldn't. What he was about to do, risking the storm, risking the rough roads, going directly against her wishes, felt unthinkable to her, but he did it anyway, for her. Rain poured down like a heavy curtain as Luke steered the truck slowly through the muddy road. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, barely keeping up with the storm. Mara sat in the passenger seat, holding on to the handle above the window, her breathing unsteady. Every bump in the road made her ankle throb, but she stayed quiet, watching Luke with a mixture of worry and wonder. He drove carefully, his hands steady on the wheel. Mud splashed against the truck, and the tires slid slightly every few minutes. But Luke never lost control. His focus didn't waver for a second. "You didn't have to do this," Mara said softly, almost drowned out by the sound of rain hitting the roof. He didn't look away from the road. "Yes, I did." She swallowed, her chest tightening. "I told you not to take me." "I know," he answered, "but I couldn't let you get worse. That wouldn't be right." Mara looked at him long and hard, realizing something she had never truly understood before. Strength wasn't only about standing alone. It was also about knowing when someone cared enough to help you stand. The road twisted downhill and the truck skidded slightly to the side. Mara gasped, gripping the seat. Luke slowed down immediately, giving her a quick, reassuring glance. "I've got you," he said calmly. She nodded, biting her lip. The rest of the ride felt long, but finally the lights of the small emergency clinic came into view, dim, but bright enough to bring hope. Luke pulled up to the entrance, hurried out into the rain, and opened her door. Without asking, he lifted her into his arms again. She didn't resist this time. Her hands rested gently on his shoulders, and her head leaned slightly against him as he carried her through the doorway. Inside, the staff rushed to help. A nurse brought a wheelchair, and Luke carefully lowered Mara into it. Her ankle throbbed sharply, but she tried not to show it. The doctor took one look at the swelling and nodded firmly. "We need X-rays immediately," he said. "It looks like a fracture." Mara's eyes lowered. She already guessed it, but hearing it aloud made her heart sink. Luke stayed beside her throughout the examination. He didn't crowd her, didn't fuss, but he stayed close enough that she could feel his presence as a steady anchor. After the X-rays, the doctor returned with the results. "Your ankle is fractured," he confirmed. "You'll need a cast and several weeks of rest, but if you had waited any longer, it could have caused permanent damage." Mara looked at Luke instantly, guilt washing over her. The doctor continued, "You were very lucky he brought you in today." Lucky. The word echoed in her mind. When the doctor and nurses stepped away to prepare the cast, Mara finally spoke. Her voice was low but honest. "Luke, I'm sorry. I should have listened to you." "No need to apologize," he said softly. Her eyes dropped to her hands. "I was scared, not just of the pain, but of everything. The rodeo season, my future, losing my chance. And I thought going to the clinic would end it all." Luke shook his head. "Your future would have been worse if this healed wrong. This way, you still have a chance." She looked at him carefully, studying his calm expression. "Why did you go against what I wanted?" Luke met her eyes with gentle seriousness. "Because sometimes people say no when they're hurting, but what they really need is someone to see past that. You needed help." "I couldn't stand by." Her breath caught slightly. No one had ever seen through her walls that easily. No one had ever cared enough to act when she resisted. The doctor returned, and after some time, they placed a sturdy cast around her ankle. The swelling would go down slowly, but she would need support and rest for weeks. When it was all done, the nurse rolled her back to the waiting area. Luke signed some papers, thanked the staff, and then returned to her side. "Ready to go home?" Mara blinked. "Home?" "I meant my ranch," he quickly corrected, though his voice softened in a way he couldn't hide. "You can stay there until you're healed." She stared at him, unsure how to respond. No one had ever opened their home to her like that. She usually slept in trailers, cheap motels, or the back of a small bunkhouse at rodeo grounds. A warm, steady place was something unfamiliar. "But I don't want to take up your space," she whispered. Luke smiled faintly. "It won't be the first time the ranch had company, and it won't bother me." Her chest tightened again, but this time in a warm, quiet way. They drove back slowly, but without the storm, the road was safer. When they arrived, Luke carried her inside again, placing her gently on the couch, making sure her cast was propped up comfortably. "You need anything?" he asked. She looked up at him, her eyes soft. I just need to rest." He nodded. "I'll be here." Days passed, and the storm left behind clear skies and a fresh breeze. Mara stayed at the ranch, resting on the couch or the porch, as Luke brought her food, water, books, and anything else she needed. She felt awkward at first, but little by little, she settled into the rhythm of his home. One morning, while he was feeding the animals, Mara watched him from the porch. He moved with quiet confidence, the kind that only came from years of living close to the land. Every motion he made felt calm, efficient, sure. It struck her how different he was from the loud crowds and quick decisions of her rodeo world. When he came back inside, she said, "Luke, do you ever feel lonely out here?" He shrugged slightly. "Sometimes, but I like the peace too, and the animals keep me company." She smiled softly. "You're good at taking care of things." "I try," he said, glancing at her ankle. "And people." She held his gaze. "You've taken care of me more than anyone has in years." Luke sat down near her, hands resting on his knees. You've spent a long time taking care of yourself. Maybe it's all right to let someone else help for once. Mara looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. It feels strange, but not bad. Luke nodded, understanding that for her, trusting someone was a big step. As the weeks passed, her ankles slowly improved. She moved from the couch to the porch, then took a few careful steps with crutches. Each day, she grew stronger. But something else grew stronger too, the quiet connection between them. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with deep orange tones, Mara and Luke sat on the porch together. The silence between them was peaceful, not heavy. When I'm healed, she said softly, I'm supposed to go back to the rodeo circuit. He nodded, though his chest tightened just a little. That's your dream. It is, she said slowly. But I don't know if I want to travel the same way anymore. Luke took a slow breath, not wanting to influence her decision. Whatever you choose, you'll be great. She turned toward him, her eyes warm. Luke, these last weeks changed something for me. I didn't expect that. He looked at her, waiting. I didn't know life could feel calm, she continued, or steady, or safe. And I didn't know I could trust someone this much. Luke felt something gentle settle in his chest. He didn't speak right away. He didn't want to ruin the moment with the wrong words. Mara took a breath and said, I don't want to stay away from the rodeo forever. But I don't want to leave this ranch behind either. He blinked, surprised. You don't? She shook her head with a small smile. No, I want both. I want to compete, but I want to have a place to come back to. A real place. And I want someone to come back to as well. Luke felt warmth spread through him. You always have a place here, he said quietly, if you want it. Her smile deepened. I do. They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the sky. For the first time in years, Mara didn't feel like she was running from anything. She felt like she had arrived somewhere she was meant to be. She reached out and gently touched Luke's hand. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For carrying me off that ridge. For helping me even when I fought you. For seeing me. Luke turned his hand and held hers, his voice steady and warm. You're easy to see, Mara. And in that quiet moment, under the wide Wyoming sky, on the porch of a small ranch where their lives had unexpectedly crossed, both of them understood. This wasn't just recovery. This wasn't just kindness. This was the beginning of something real, something neither of them saw coming, something that would last.